Alaska has a lightly regulated tenant screening environment with few state-level restrictions beyond the federal baseline, but with broader fair housing protections than many states and practical screening challenges unique to the last frontier. The governing framework includes the Alaska Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, found in Alaska Statutes Title 34, Chapter 03, along with FCRA and the Alaska Human Rights Law. If you're screening tenants in Alaska, the federal requirements are your primary screening framework, but Alaska's unique demographics, geography, and housing dynamics create practical considerations unlike anywhere else in the country. Let's start with application fees. Alaska does not cap application fees. There is no state statute limiting what a landlord can charge for tenant screening. The Alaska Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act does not address application fee amounts, procedures, or refund requirements. Landlords can charge whatever they determine is reasonable. Most Alaska landlords charge between $25 and $50 per applicant. Alaska's cost of living is significantly higher than the national average, and screening costs may be slightly higher due to the state's remote geography and the limited availability of some verification services. Applicants in Alaska's population centers, particularly Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau, are accustomed to paying screening fees. Keeping fees proportionate to actual costs remains good practice. Criminal history screening in Alaska is unrestricted at the state level. Alaska does not have a ban-the-box or fair chance housing law for housing. There are no state-level restrictions preventing landlords from asking about criminal history on the initial application. Landlords can inquire about arrests and convictions, can use criminal history as a screening factor without conducting a formal individualized assessment, and are not subject to state-mandated look-back period limits. No Alaska municipality has enacted a local criminal history screening restriction for housing. Anchorage, Fairbanks, Juneau, and every other Alaska community operate under the same unrestricted framework. Alaska has provisions for setting aside criminal convictions under AS 12.55.085. When a conviction is set aside, the court issues an order vacating the judgment. The individual is released from all disabilities arising from the conviction. While this isn't a full expungement, the record of the conviction may still be accessible. The set-aside represents judicial recognition of rehabilitation. Landlords should understand the significance of a set-aside when evaluating screening results. Alaska also has provisions for sealing certain records, particularly juvenile records and records in cases that were dismissed or resulted in acquittal. Sealed records should not appear on standard background checks, and landlords cannot consider them. Alaska has not legalized recreational marijuana. Alaska legalized recreational marijuana in 2014, making it one of the earliest states to do so. Landlords should not use marijuana possession or use records as a basis for denial for conduct that is legal under current Alaska law. While landlords can prohibit marijuana use on the premises through lease provisions, using historical marijuana records for legal conduct to deny an application creates risk. Alaska's early adoption of marijuana legalization means the state has a longer history of legal marijuana than most states, and the use of marijuana records in screening should reflect this reality. HUD's 2016 guidance on criminal history and disparate impact applies in Alaska. Alaska has a significant Alaska Native population, approximately 16% of the state's total population, with much higher percentages in rural communities and the bush. Criminal history policies that disproportionately affect Alaska Native applicants face particular scrutiny under federal fair housing law. Alaska's criminal justice system has been documented to have disparities affecting Alaska Natives, and blanket rejection policies create federal risk. Documenting your criteria and applying them consistently, with consideration for the nature of the offense, time elapsed, and relevance to the tenancy, is essential. Source of income protection does not exist at the state level in Alaska. Landlords are not prohibited from considering the source of an applicant's income when making screening decisions. Landlords can legally decline applicants who pay with housing choice vouchers, Social Security, disability payments, or other government assistance. No Alaska municipality has enacted a local source of income protection ordinance. Participation in voucher programs is entirely voluntary. However, Alaska has a unique income source that's relevant to the screening context: the Permanent Fund Dividend. Every Alaska resident receives an annual payment from the Alaska Permanent Fund, typically between $1,000 and $3,000 depending on the year. While the PFD is not a regular monthly income source, it represents supplemental income that many Alaska tenants rely on. Some landlords time rent adjustments or payment plans around the PFD distribution. The PFD is a lawful source of income, and while Alaska doesn't have source of income protections, landlords should be aware that the PFD is a standard part of the Alaska financial landscape. For credit reports, Alaska follows standard FCRA requirements: permissible purpose, written consent, and adverse action notice procedures. Alaska does not impose additional state-level requirements for credit report access, adverse action content, or notification timelines beyond FCRA. One practical consideration for credit screening in Alaska: the state's high cost of living, geographic isolation, and unique economic dynamics affect credit profiles. Alaska residents face higher costs for virtually everything: housing, food, transportation, heating fuel, and consumer goods than their counterparts in the lower 48. Financial stress from the high cost of living can affect credit scores even for employed, responsible individuals. Setting credit score thresholds calibrated to Alaska's conditions rather than lower 48 standards is important. Additionally, some Alaska residents, particularly in remote communities, may have limited interaction with the mainstream credit system. Individuals who have lived primarily in remote villages may have thin credit files or no credit file at all, not because they're irresponsible, but because the opportunities to build credit are limited in communities without banks, credit card acceptance, or traditional commerce. Having criteria for evaluating applicants with thin or non-existent credit files is particularly important in Alaska. Alaska's fair housing protections under the Alaska Human Rights Law, found in AS Title 18, Chapter 80, are broader than the federal baseline. Protected categories include race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, disability, familial status, marital status, parenthood, age, and changes in marital status. The breadth of these protections, particularly the inclusion of sexual orientation, marital status, parenthood, age, and changes in marital status, goes substantially beyond federal law. The parenthood protection is unusual and worth noting. Landlords cannot discriminate against applicants because they have children, whether born, adopted, or through foster care. While familial status under the Federal Fair Housing Act provides similar protection, Alaska's specific enumeration of parenthood reinforces this protection and potentially extends it beyond the federal definition. The changes in marital status protection means landlords cannot discriminate against applicants who have recently married, divorced, become widowed, or experienced other changes in marital status. This protects applicants during life transitions. A recently divorced individual applying for a new rental cannot be penalized for the change in their circumstances. The Alaska State Commission for Human Rights investigates fair housing complaints and has enforcement authority, including ordering damages, injunctive relief, and civil penalties. While Alaska's enforcement environment is less aggressive than heavily regulated states due to the state's small population and limited agency resources, the Commission does actively investigate complaints and take action. From a practical standpoint, Alaska has a rental market unlike any other state, shaped by extreme geography, severe climate, limited housing supply, and an economy heavily influenced by oil, military, and government spending. Anchorage is the state's dominant rental market, home to approximately 40% of Alaska's total population. The economy is driven by oil and gas industry headquarters and support services, healthcare, including Providence, Alaska Medical Center and the Alaska Native Medical Center, military. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson is one of the largest military installations in the Pacific. State and federal government, transportation and logistics, and tourism. Military tenants at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, known as JBER, represent a substantial portion of the Anchorage rental market. JBER houses both Air Force and Army units, and the military population includes active duty service members, civilian DoD employees, and contractors. BAH rates for Anchorage are among the highest in the nation, reflecting the extreme cost of housing. Landlords who serve the military market should have streamlined military income verification processes. BAH is guaranteed income for the duration of the member's Alaska assignment, typically 2 to 3 years. Anchorage's rental market has experienced challenges related to Alaska's broader fiscal situation. The state's dependence on oil revenue has created budget uncertainty, and periods of lower oil prices have affected government employment and spending. These economic headwinds have moderated rent growth compared to some lower 48 markets. Screening in Anchorage involves a diverse applicant pool, including military families, oil industry workers, healthcare professionals, government employees, Alaska Native residents, and service industry workers. The diversity of the applicant pool requires screening criteria that can fairly evaluate applicants from very different backgrounds. Fairbanks, Alaska's second-largest city, has a rental market driven by the military, Fort Wainwright and Eielson Air Force Base, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, healthcare, and government services. Fairbanks' extreme climate, winter temperatures can reach 50 below zero, creates unique housing demands and dramatically affects heating costs. Military tenants at Fort Wainwright and Eielson represent a major portion of the Fairbanks rental market. Service members are typically stationed in Alaska for 2 to 3 year tours, creating regular turnover. BAH rates for Fairbanks reflect the high cost of living, and landlords should monitor annual adjustments. Screening in Fairbanks during winter months involves a practical consideration. Applicants may be relocating from the lower 48 and have no understanding of Alaska's extreme conditions. While this isn't a screening criterion, landlords who serve the military market often find it helpful to provide information about winterization, heating costs, and cold weather preparation as part of the rental process. Juneau, the state capital, has one of the tightest rental markets in Alaska. The city is accessible only by air or water. There are no roads connecting Juneau to the rest of the state, which severely limits development and keeps housing supply constrained. State government employment is the primary economic driver. Rents in Juneau are high relative to the city's small population, and vacancies are extremely low. Screening in Juneau's tight market means landlords generally have strong applicant pools, but the limited supply also means that screening errors are costly because replacing a problem tenant takes longer when the turnover pool is small. Sitka, Ketchikan, Kodiak, and other smaller Alaska communities have very limited rental markets. Housing supply is constrained by geography, high construction costs, and small populations. Kodiak, home to the largest Coast Guard base in the country, has military-influenced rental demand. Screening in these small communities requires balancing thorough evaluation with the practical reality of a very limited applicant pool. Remote Alaska, including communities in the interior, western Alaska, the Aleutians, and the North Slope, has a rental market that functions differently from anywhere else in the country. Many remote communities are not connected to the road system and are accessible only by air or water. Housing is often employer-provided, particularly by oil companies, mining operations, and government agencies. Private rental housing in these communities is extremely limited. Screening applicants in remote Alaska may involve evaluating income from seasonal employment, including commercial fishing, which is a major seasonal income source. Fishing income can be substantial but highly variable. A good fishing season may produce significantly more income than a poor one. Having criteria for evaluating seasonal and variable income is important for Alaska landlords who serve communities with fishing-dependent economies. The oil industry creates specific screening dynamics. Oil workers, particularly those who work on the North Slope on rotation schedules, may earn high incomes but work 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or similar rotation patterns. Their income is verifiable through pay stubs and employer confirmation, but the rotation schedule means they may not be physically present at the rental for extended periods. Understanding these work patterns helps landlords evaluate oil industry applicants accurately. One best practice for Alaska landlords: develop criteria for evaluating applicants with thin or non-existent credit files. Alaska has a higher proportion of residents with limited credit histories than most states, particularly Alaska natives from remote communities and younger residents. Rather than automatically rejecting applicants with no credit file, establish alternative evaluation methods, such as accepting co-signers, verifying employment stability and income through pay stubs and bank statements, using utility payment history as a creditworthiness indicator, and evaluating the applicant's overall financial stability. Apply these alternative methods consistently to all applicants who lack traditional credit files. Another best practice, for landlords serving the military market in Anchorage, Fairbanks, Kodiak, and other installation-adjacent communities, develop a standardized military screening checklist. Military applicants in Alaska have some of the highest BAH rates in the country, making them well-compensated and reliable tenants. The LES shows exact pay and allowances, BAH is guaranteed, and military members understand that financial irresponsibility can affect their careers. Streamlining the military screening process ensures you can capture these desirable tenants quickly in competitive markets. A third best practice, given Alaska's broad fair housing protections, including sexual orientation, parenthood, age, marital status, and changes in marital status, review your application form to ensure it doesn't collect information about these protected characteristics. Alaska protects more categories than the federal baseline, and questions about marital status changes, number of children, age, or personal relationships should be limited to what's necessary for legitimate occupancy determinations. Train anyone who handles applications on the full scope of Alaska's protected categories. Alaska limits the security deposit to 2 months' rent. The deposit must be returned within 14 days if there are no deductions, or within 30 days if the landlord needs to assess damages. If the landlord fails to return the deposit within the required period, the landlord may be liable for up to twice the amount wrongfully withheld, plus attorney's fees. The 2-month deposit cap provides moderate financial protection, but thorough screening remains the most effective tool, particularly in Alaska, where the eviction process can be complicated by weather, geography, and limited court access in remote areas. For the complete guide to Alaska tenant screening laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our tenant screening law series.